This is wildlife biologist Eric Orff with my New Hampshire Fish and Wildlife YouTube channel. Today is Saturday the 14th of November. We're into the New Hampshire's deer hunting season, regular deer hunting season. And I was thinking this morning how many deer hunters across New Hampshire right now, this morning, are in their tree stands. So I dug out one of my articles from some decades back. As a wildlife biologist for nearly 50 years here in New Hampshire, and a long-time communicator and member of the New England Outdoor Writers Association, I've been a long-time communicator and writer. So here is an article that I had written probably a decade or two ago that reflects on these folks that are in their tree stand this morning hunting deer. It's called My Tree Stand, My Castle. So why do perfectly normal and some not so normal grown men hunt from tree stands? The answer is obvious, albeit somewhat complex. My urge to hunt from a tree stand started very early when I was just hunting for things to see. I spent a good part of my preteen years growing up on a dairy farm in northern Maine. The farm that my dad owned was blessed with stacks of boards he had salvaged from an old shed we had torn down soon after our arrival on the farm. Boards, trees, and kids placed in close proximity on a farm can only lead to one thing: a treehouse stand. Fairly soon, treehouses began to grace the stout box elders which flourished in the fertile ground around the remaining barn that my father refurbished to contain his prized herd of registered Guernseys. A treehouse was a perfect place for a boy to while away an afternoon before chores. In fact, my older brother Alan and I constructed several treehouses, some together and some on our own, which we fiercely guarded. I remember keeping a box of crackers and a jar of peanut butter in one of mine. Even a double-decker sprouted from the crotch of a hapless tree to the east of the barn. This one peered out over the vastness of the apple orchard with a gentle sloping pasture beyond, sweeping down to the swamp. That was another one of my favorite places. I bet that old tree looked like a great blue heron rookery with nests or houses awkwardly jutting out from each major crotch in the tree. Some were square, one was rectangular, the most spacious, and even a triangular one or two, squatted amongst the tree limbs. From a treehouse stand, the world spreads out in a radius from your position like a spokes from a hub of a wheel. You are the masters of the particular piece of good earth that you command from the view. Like a treehouse, a tree stand really is your castle from which you command a view of the vast empire, whether real or imagined. One only needs to look at the castles of Europe and the Buddhist temples in Asia to sense that you are part of a long-standing tradition. These castles are all built on the pinnacles of hills and mountains for the occupants to oversee their domain. Oh, what a life you lead high in a tree. A deer stand is no different than the castles and trees of yore. And tree houses of yore. The vantage point sparks the imagination. Each squirrel, bird, or snap of a twig or rustle of leaves stirred by a distant breeze stirs the imagination as well. Is it a big buck headed your way? A hunter strains his senses of listening and watching, his eyes focused to catch the slightest movement trying to detect the perpetrator of the sound. A fluttering leaf is carefully examined to make sure it's not a flicking ear of a deer. The horizontal limb that on the distant tree suddenly looks like the top of a deer's back, even though you have stared at that same limb 100 times before. A hunter's heart races and leaps into his now dry throat, but alas, it was only the wind. So the hunter tries to relax until the next subtle noise startles him once again. Modern tree stands, like our tree houses as kids, come in all shapes, sizes, and manner of attachments to trees. All are designed to connect you to a tree amongst its branches, and by doing so, it connects you to the wild world about you. A hunter can become one with nature if he applies a measure of patience. Anyone who spends any amount of time in a tree stand can attest to the feeling of closeness to nature, but it takes at least 20 minutes to an hour before the subtleties of the wild world around you begin to reveal themselves. But they do. First, you begin to hear all the noises of the wild, and a scampering chipmunk or squirrel, a blue jay scolding something beyond your vision. How can so many things be going on right before your very eyes and ears when only a half hour ago When you walk to the tree stand, the woods seem to be devoid of life as your feet trod on the seemingly lifeless ground. The difference is from a tree stand, you are no longer interfering with the flow of life that is natural to these woods. By being quiet, motionless, and lifting your scent off the forest floor, you have returned the woods to their natural state. A person walking through the woods sends out a wake of disturbance like a boat or canoe on a tranquil pond. In fact, it's actually, as studies have shown, when you walk, you are disturbing wildlife 100 yards on each side of you. So your ripples are sensed by the wildlife and they flee or hide. A tree stand removes your ripples from the forest floor. The longer you remain quiet and still in a tree stand, the more life the woods reveals itself. You can begin to sense the very pulse of the earth and the flow of life through it. A tree stand is your castle, a place to gaze over the land and places you love, and the moments you learn to cherish as they become lodged in your memory forever. Yes, tree stands are awesome, and New Hampshire deer hunters, good luck this weekend.